What if I told you that there was an NHL defenseman who everyone called dirty and cheap? From bone-crushing hits that sent guys to the hospital to stick work that got him suspended, Duncan Keith was known as one of the dirtiest players in hockey history, and his low-light reels are honestly some of the worst on YouTube. But how did this dirty player become the most clutch defenseman when it mattered most? And why did his dirty style actually make him the perfect playoff warrior? Well, to find out, we have to go back to 2002. The Chicago Blackhawks, coming off one of the worst seasons in franchise history, were set to face years of rebuilding in a league that was getting faster and more skilled every year. But how is it that a kid from small-town Fort Francis, Ontario, who everyone said was too small and too mean, would become the guy you want on the ice when everything's on the line? Well, Duncan Keith, whose family had watched him get passed over by bigger, cleaner players his whole life, had learned that sometimes you have to play dirty to survive. The hours he spent getting stronger and meaner while other kids worked on pretty plays were about to pay off, and his unique ability to cross the line when nobody was looking was about to become his greatest weapon. Duncan Keith grew up in Fort Francis, Ontario, a tiny town of just over 7,000 people sitting right on the border with Minnesota, where hockey wasn't just a sport, it was survival. In 1985, Duncan's family moved to Fort Francis after his father was transferred from Winnipeg for an assistant manager position at a Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce CIBC branch. Living only 2 blocks from the outdoor rink in Fort Francis, the Keith kids had practically unlimited ice time, and Duncan's obsession with making it to the NHL was clear from the start. He decided when he was 8 or 9 where he was headed. Take the piece of paper Dave and Jean discovered one day, a fearless forecast their son authored in a felt-tip pen. Duncan Keith will make it to the NHL. But there was one massive problem. Everyone told Duncan he was way too small to ever make it. At the age of 10, his coaches Gibb and Bill Tucker decided to switch Duncan from forward to defense. Yet even as a defenseman, the kid was tiny. And in hockey, if you're small, you learn one thing fast. You better be tough, or you're going home. Duncan always wanted to be the first one on the ice, recalls Jean, who out of necessity taught her son how to start the car for the 5 a.m. sessions. When a guidance counselor asked him about a backup plan, Duncan was devastated. He cried for 2 days because he thought Mr. Grabowski meant he wasn't going to be a hockey player. This wasn't just some kid's dream, this was an obsession. However, when Duncan was 14, his family moved to Penticton, British Columbia. If Brett Hull and Paul Kariya could play in Penticton, it must be a good hockey town, his father reasoned. Playing junior hockey with the Penticton Panthers, Duncan wasn't just putting up points, he was learning how to intimidate. Over an illustrious 2-year career, Keith finished with 78 goals and 148 assists for 226 points in 163 games. But those weren't just pretty offensive numbers. Duncan had figured out the secret that would define his entire career. If you can't beat them with size, you beat them by being the guy they don't want to mess with. When the 2002 NHL draft arrived, Duncan had to sit and wait as player after player got their name called. Keith was selected by the Chicago Blackhawks in the second round, 54th overall, of the 2002 NHL entry draft. 53 players got picked before the kid from Fort Francis. But that draft day disappointment was just the beginning of Duncan's challenges, because even after getting picked by Chicago, his NHL dream seemed further away than ever. He signed with Chicago prior to the 2003-04 season and spent his first 2 seasons after junior in the American Hockey League with the team affiliate Norfolk Admirals. Keith's chances of earning a spot with the Blackhawks the following season were eliminated due to the 2004-05 NHL lockout. It was during those frustrating months that Duncan Keith made a decision that would define his career. If being small and playing nice wasn't going to get him to the NHL, then he was going to become the kind of player that opposing forwards would dread facing. Finally, in October 2005, Duncan Keith stepped onto NHL ice for the first time. He played in his first NHL game on October 5th, 2005, against the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim. He made an immediate impact on the club, scoring 9 goals and 12 assists for 21 points, while averaging over 23 minutes of ice time in 81 games during his 2005-06 NHL rookie season. Keith broke in on October 5, 2005, when the Blackhawks were struggling deep in the abyss of irrelevance. The team was a joke, and they desperately needed someone who wasn't afraid to play tough. Keith credited coach Trent Yawney, a former NHL defenseman, with mentoring him on the ways of a professional. While Yawney taught him the fundamentals, Duncan was learning how to play with an edge and compete at the highest level. By mid-January, he was averaging 24-31 minutes of ice time and had a team-leading plus-minus of +14. He was rewarded for this effort by a selection to his first NHL All-Star game in 2008. But while Duncan was earning recognition, he was also building a reputation as someone you didn't want to mess with. In 2013, during the Western Conference Finals, Duncan swung his stick upward and connected with Jeff Carter's face while the two were skating behind the play. Carter fell to the ice and later required 20 stitches. This is a retaliatory high stick to an opponent that causes an injury, NHL Vice President Brendan Shanahan explained. Keith received a 5-game suspension for the incident, his first major suspension. Despite this, Duncan's teammates and the Blackhawks stood by him. They knew that without his edge, without his willingness to do the tough work, they wouldn't be contenders. His physical style wasn't hurting the team, it was helping them win championships. But something started to change in Duncan Keith during the 2009 to 2010 season. As the Chicago Blackhawks began their historic run, Duncan realized that his dirty reputation alone wasn't enough. He needed to become a complete hockey player. On December 3rd, 2009, the Blackhawks announced having extended Keith's contract simultaneously with Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane. At $72 million over 13 years, Keith's contract was the most lucrative in team history. The 2010 playoffs would prove to be Duncan's defining moment. During Game 4 of the Western Conference Finals against the Sharks on May 23, 2010, Keith had 7 teeth knocked out by a puck on a clearing attempt by Sharks forward Patrick Marleau. He returned minutes after the incident to help the Blackhawks complete a 4-game sweep of the Sharks and advance to the Stanley Cup Finals for the first time since 1992. This wasn't just about being tough anymore. This was about leadership. While other players might have gone to the locker room, Duncan spat out his teeth and kept playing. However, what really opened people's eyes was how Duncan's game had evolved. He completed the season with 14 goals and 55 assists for 69 points in all 82 contests. Duncan wasn't just playing mean anymore. He was playing smart. He had learned when to use his edge and when to focus on pure hockey skill. Keith finished the postseason with 17 points, 2 goals and 15 assists over all 22 contests. The guy everyone called dirty was now putting up elite offensive numbers in the playoffs, and the hockey world took notice. Keith is the 4th different Chicago defenseman to win the award, and the first since 1996. Keith, 26, established career highs in goals, 14, assists, 55, and points, 69, while skating in all 80 games, 82 regular season games for Chicago during the 2009-10 campaign. Duncan Keith won the Norris Trophy as the NHL's best defenseman. The same guy who had been suspended for dirty hits was now being recognized as the best at his position in the entire league. Additionally, yet it was in the 2015 playoffs where Duncan truly proved that his dirty style had evolved into something special. Keith started the Blackhawks playoff run with a double overtime goal to win their first round opener against Nashville. But it wasn't just one clutch moment, it was an entire postseason of dominance. Keith played 715 total minutes in the postseason, becoming just the 4th defenseman to top 700 playoff minutes since the league began tracking the statistic in 2001. Keith logged an astonishing 31 minutes per game in the Blackhawks' 23 playoff contests. The ultimate vindication came in Game 6 of the 2015 Stanley Cup Final. Keith converted his own rebound against Ben Bishop to create a 1-0 lead against the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Blackhawks triumphed 2-0 in the only game not separated by 1 goal to claim their 3rd cup in 6 years and first on home ice since 1938. The 31-year-old was the unanimous choice to win his first Conn Smythe Trophy as the playoff MVP, adding it to a trophy case that includes 3 NHL championship rings, 2 Norris Trophies, and 2 Olympic gold medals. Duncan Keith had transformed from the league's most hated player into its most clutch performer. "It's about time," said Captain Jonathan Toews, the 2010 Conn Smythe winner. "We all know he's going to go down as one of the great players to play the game. His willingness to cross lines, to do whatever it took to win, hadn't disappeared. It had evolved. He had learned to channel that competitive fire into becoming the player you wanted on the ice when everything was on the line. The dirty reputation that once defined him had become the clutch gene that made him legendary." By the time Duncan Keith reached his 30s, something remarkable had happened. The player once known for his physical style had become the guy everyone wanted when the games mattered most. After 20 minutes on Wednesday night, it looked as if the Chicago Blackhawks were going to get blown out in the first game of their Western Conference playoff series against the Nashville Predators. They were down 3-0, but the Blackhawks refused to go away and rallied with 4 consecutive goals to take Game 1 in Nashville 4-3, thanks to Duncan Keith's game-winning goal in double overtime. Duncan Keith's goal, 7:49 into double overtime, completed the Chicago Blackhawks' rally. This wasn't just any playoff goal, this was the moment that showed Duncan Keith had become the ultimate clutch performer. His third-period goal broke a 3-3 tie against the Nashville Predators, giving Chicago the lead with just 3 minutes and 48 seconds left in the game. What truly separated Duncan from everyone else was his incredible ability to play through pain. Keith most famously played during the 2010 playoffs after losing some teeth from a high stick, earning the nickname Duncan Teeth. Since 2009, the Chicago Blackhawks defenseman has logged more playoff minutes than anyone in the NHL. In fact, it's not even close. His 3,055 minutes over 109 games is first by a mile, nearly 500 ahead of teammate Brent Seabrook. By 2015, the hockey world had completely changed its opinion of Duncan Keith. He was averaging just shy of 32 minutes, 31 minutes, and 49 seconds per game. That was the highest in his career, and it was a couple of months before his 32nd birthday. Keith capped his indefatigable 2-month surge with the winning goal in Chicago's Stanley Cup clinching 2-0 victory over the Tampa Bay Lightning in Game 6. The 31-year-old was the unanimous choice to win his first Conn Smythe Trophy as the playoff MVP. According to ESPN Stats and Information, Keith is the second defenseman in history to win the Conn Smythe and score the winning goal in the cup-clinching game. Bobby Orr did it for the Boston Bruins in 1970 and 1972. The numbers were staggering, but it was what his opponents said that really showed how much Duncan's reputation had changed. In 2017, Keith was named one of the 100 greatest NHL players in history. The league that once suspended him was now putting him on their all-time list. Because here's the truth everyone finally understood. Duncan Keith's physical style was never about being dirty at all. It was about doing whatever it took to win when it mattered most. Duncan Keith deserves it because nobody did his job better with the Blackhawks, ever. He had learned to channel that competitive fire into becoming the most clutch defenseman in hockey history. The reputation that once made him a villain had transformed him into a legend. So let me know what you think below. Was Duncan Keith really dirty, or was he just doing what it takes to win? Do you think his style was cheap or smart? Share your thoughts below. I want to hear them. And if you enjoyed learning the real story behind Duncan Keith's transformation from hockey's most hated player to its most clutch performer, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. What other dirty players do you think had a method to their madness? Drop your suggestions in the comments.